Welcome to Shattering Myths, a program devoted to the most important and to the fastest growing segment of society. To those who have come to know, as have I, that the world's political, religious, military, and economic institutions are corrupt, that they're rotten to the core, that they have become counterproductive, and that no matter the massive good intentions, they cannot be fixed. Our mission, therefore, is to look behind the headlines, to know who is working against our interests, to understand what they're doing and why they are doing so. Because exposing and condemning errant and treacherous schemes, even if those schemes are being promoted as patriotic, as a part of our military preparedness and defenses, even if they're being promoted as part of a religious faith or part of a political party, it isn't hateful to expose them. It is instead caring. It's the most compassionate thing we can do. In our concluding hour, we're going to use evidence and reason to explore Yahowah's Torah teaching, because its covenant provides the only reliable answer for you and your family. Our phone number, if you'd like to participate in this discussion anytime over the next 3 hours, is 877-300-7645. This morning it's my pleasure to welcome KLID to Shattering Myths. The program is found now at 1340 on your AM dial, broadcasting out of Poplar Bluff, Missouri. Jerry Evans, who is the program director at KLID, made the decision to allow the Shattering Myths program to broadcast on their station. Should you be curious, Poplar Bluff is a gateway to the Ozarks. It is almost directly central between St. Louis and Memphis, Tennessee, St. Louis, Missouri. Beautiful part of the country. This program plays on a delay in 1340 KLID, so those who are listening to it, many in the wee hours of the evening, you won't be able to call into this program on the 877-300-7645 line, unless you choose to also listen in live when the program is being broadcast beginning at noon Eastern Time, 5 days a week. But you can send me an email if you have a question or a concern on anything that is said during this program. The email, which I will gladly read on the air and respond to, is yada@yadayah.com. Yada@yadayah.com. I also want to thank Adam Miller, who works in affiliate relations for GCN, for his work in getting the program syndicated. Reuters is reporting that a security industry pioneer, one of the most acclaimed internet security companies, RSA, has adopted not one, but 2 encryption tools and integrated them into their software that were actually deployed and developed by the U.S. National Security Agency. So the U.S. National Security Agency, the NSA, actually developed a security protocol, an encryption protocol, that it had the ability to crack, and then gave it to RSA with the full knowledge that RSA's customers, who were relying on their encryption and their security measures to protect their information, would now have a back door that the NSA could enter. This is really disgusting. It, of course, increased the spy agency's ability to eavesdrop on internet communications of any RSA customer. Reuters reported in December that the NSA had paid RSA $10 million to make the now discredited cryptography system the default in their software. which is used by a wide range of internet and computer security programmers. So here you've got the U.S. government developing an encryption tool that is designed so that they are not in any way locked out of people's files and secrets in their servers. It gives them a backdoor to enter their servers, and then they paid a bribe of $10 million to a business to integrate this failed system, this system that was specifically designed to do the opposite of what their customers were paying for to accept it. So, here's a company making a product that it is selling, causing businesses to pay money for, that they know full well, and that the government knows full well that that transaction is fraudulent. That rather than making the data, their servers, their information, their secrets, their clients' communications private, it's doing exactly the opposite. That means that RSA's customers were paying the firm to make their files and their servers and their customers' communications vulnerable. It's a stunning revelation. And that the U.S. government was not only complicit in it, and not only made the software vulnerable, but then paid a bribe to RSA to implement it. Now, the reason I share this with you, it is important that Americans come to recognize that their government is corrupt, that it can't be fixed, that it's rotten to the core, that it's absolutely out of control, that it is grotesquely immoral, that it's lost all pretense of ethical judgment. It's important that you recognize that. It's time to stop being patriotic. It's time to stop waving the flag. The America that is somehow still envisioned by many no longer exists. It's not to say that the average American is immoral and corrupt, but their government is. It is not worthy of one's support or loyalty. The system, called the dual elliptic curve, was a random number generator, but it had a deliberate, purposeful flaw, or backdoor, that enabled and allowed the NSA to crack the encryption and steal whatever files they wanted. A group of professors from Johns Hopkins, the University of Wisconsin, and the University of Illinois, and elsewhere now say that they have discovered a second NSA tool that exacerbated the RSA software's vulnerability. Your government is dishonest. Your government is engaged in illegal thievery and bribery and corruption, dishonesty, false testimony, false witness, you name it. That kind of stuff doesn't make you more secure. It makes you more vulnerable. Federal regulators decided not to open an inquiry into the Chevrolet Cobalt and other cars after their own investigators reported way back in 2007 that they knew of 4 fatal crashes and 29 complaints and 14 other reports that showed that the problem disabled airbags in General Motors cars. Now, this means that the federal investigation in 2008 into GM, prior to the U.S. Treasury forcing it into bankruptcy, apart from the normal bankruptcy process, which serves to protect those who are owed money by companies, that the U.S. plan said, we don't care about those who are owed money. We only care about the union and about the U.S. Treasury and about our political interests. And so GM was forced into bankruptcy by the Obama administration, with the Obama administration taking credit for what was a disastrous undertaking, one that completely undermined the faith and credibility of the free enterprise system in America. Well, now we learn that the federal government botched its bankruptcy investigation. This was a serious liability that needed to be known, that should have been known. But in their due diligence, the U.S. government failed miserably. And then when the Treasury forced the company into bankruptcy in 2009, with the government and union owning the productive assets, it shows that it was inept in managing the company. In 2010, the National Safety Transportation Board came to the same decision after receiving more reports that the airbags were not deploying. So here's a government agency, now from this same U.S. government, the Obama administration, that has hundreds of complaints, many deaths, associated with the same problem on GM cars. And because now the U.S. Treasury and the unions own GM, its productive assets, they chose not to disclose the problem. They let people die to further their political agenda. Now, this suggests a cover-up by the Obama administration. The de facto owner, and at the time, the CEO of GM, President Obama, was the effective CEO of GM at the time this was going on. Ought not be pointing their fingers at the present CEO. She didn't join the company until just a few months ago. At the time that this was occurring, the Obama administration was the acting head of GM. Now, striking new details bolster the contention that both GM and the National Highway Safety Traffic Administration, or Traffic Safety Administration, more than previously acknowledged, ignored or dismissed warnings for more than a decade about a faulty ignition switch, which, if bumped, would turn off the engine and would disable the airbags. This is a serious problem. General Motors has now recalled more than 2.6 million cars that have been linked to 13 deaths attributable to this defect. Now, when we return to Shattering Myths, we're going to talk about the feds and how this case compares to what they did to Toyota, to show that the U.S. government is purely hypocritical, as is the Justice Department. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. The thing that is so troubling to me about the U.S. government, particularly the Justice Department, because it has become so unjust here recently, is the comparison of this case of a company that the U.S. Treasury owned, that the Obama administration ran, compared to the treatment of Toyota. In this case, you've got the Obama administration sending up a CEO of GM that wasn't even there during any of this time, as opposed to the Obama administration itself sitting there in Congress getting the grilling on how they missed this. It was under their watch. And yet with Toyota, the Fed sued Toyota, with the government collecting $1.2 billion, all because a foreign, non-government-owned car company concealed information and may have misled the public regarding the thickness of their floor mats. In that case, there weren't 13 deaths, there were only 7 worldwide. And the company already paid $3 billion before the U.S. Justice Department sued them in civil settlements, which is the way the whole process is supposed to work. If a customer is wronged, they have the opportunity to settle their grievance with the business. They did so in the case of Toyota. The system worked. And Toyota paid $3 billion in settlements with their customers and voluntary repair costs, almost all of which had nothing, were caused by nothing more than the thickness of the floor mat and the length of the gas pedal. It is the same country that sued Toyota for incomplete disclosure, that has misled Americans about every aspect of the NSA, that has murdered 4,000 civilians worldwide with drones, none of which were indicted or tried for any crime. My pleasure to welcome Glenn to the program. How are you this fine day, Glenn?
Doing all right. It's a little rainy here in suburbs of Philadelphia, but all righty. At least there are no 8+ earthquakes here.
Yeah, that was a massive earthquake. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the communities that can hear the broadcast now on KLID out of Poplar Bluff, Missouri, is the site of what was the most severe swarm of earthquakes in American history. New Madrid.
Well, the New Madrid fault, yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, in New Madrid, if my memory is serving me correctly, between 1811, around mid-December of 1811 through early February of 1812, there were 3 massive earthquakes on the Richter scale, 7.7, 7.5 in that range, 3 in that range, and that compares quite favorably. In fact, that is actually more severe than the single 8.2 quake that struck off Chile on Tuesday. So didn't it
temporarily reverse the flow of the direction of one of the rivers?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Yeah, and it created this a major disturbance in the atmosphere, where there was so much dust and debris that was released from this earthquake that the sun was blocked for a period of time. So, yes, in this area between St. Louis and Memphis, they've experienced, now not those living there now. There's not a whole lot of folks from 1812 that are still with us, but this part of the country has experienced.
They were definitely thinking the apocalypse was upon them, I think. You know?
Well, I think by the time that you had the third earthquake of that magnitude, and essentially nothing was standing, that you would think, maybe maybe ought to move from here. And the interesting thing is that New Madrid at the time was one of the largest communities in the region. Now, this was way back in a time when America didn't have much of a footprint west of the Mississippi. So
St. Louis was an Indian reservation, basically. Pittsburgh was the gateway to the west back then.
Yes, and we're told this is an interesting thing too, that we are told that one of the birth pangs for the that will usher in the tribulation and ultimately Yahowah's return is going to be megaseismos. And megaseismos is both earthquakes, it is hurricanes, tornadoes, and tsunamis. There was a tsunami as a result of this 8.2 earthquake. But a birth pang means that they're going to occur at greater frequency and an increasing magnitude as we move towards the return of Yahusha, which is going to be in year 6000 Yah, 2033, on our pagan calendars. Stay with us, Glenn. We'll be back after the commercial break. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. We've got Glenn on the line. Glenn, my guess is you probably didn't call in to tell us that in Philadelphia you survived the 8.2 earthquake out of Chile. So before we move to the next item in the news, I do want to hear what you have to say.
Well, initially I wanted to congratulate you on your foray into syndication and Poplar Bluff radio station. However, knowing something of Ozark demography,
yes,
having gone to college in Springfield,
okay,
Missouri, which happens to be the home of the international headquarters of the Assemblies of God, a Reformed college, two Pentecostal colleges and a Pentecostal seminary, and a city in which every corner has a gas station, a convenience store, and a church.
Yes.
I'm thinking about the demography of that region. I'm just wondering if that station director or program director has a suicidal tendency.
Yeah, well, I look forward to actually doing interviews on his show. It's drive time show, and I hope that we'll engage in and have cross communication as I have over the years with a lot of different radio stations. Your
rivals certainly will not go unnoticed.
Yeah, that's probably true. Though, Glenn, one of the things that I am finding, and I think it's far more pervasive even in Middle America, in the heartland of America, is that there are a lot of people who have come to realize that there's really something wrong with their church, that there's something wrong with their government, that there's something wrong with the use of our military, that there's something wrong economically in this country. And even across the heartland of this country, there are fewer and fewer people that are blindly going to their church, that are voting for the lesser of two evils. And so I suspect that in Missouri, there are a lot of people who are thoughtful. When I did all of those some 3,000 talk radio interviews in association with Tea with Terrorists and Prophet of Doom, and in doing them, what I found is that that if you had an audience that was for a local station as opposed to a syndicated show, and if that local station broadcast in an area like Missouri or like Wyoming or Montana or Utah, Colorado, states without a huge urban population where people are more independent, more independently responsible. What I found is that a disproportionate number of listeners. I'd go so far as to say the vast preponderance of callers from communities like Missouri, states in the heartland of America, got it. I remember doing a guy named Dave Chaffee. I dearly love Dave. He just retired. He had cancer issues and finally had to retire. He broadcast a Clear Channel station, a big blowtorch, in Wyoming that reached about 7 or 8 states. That's how big the station was. And I did Dave Chaffee's show on KGAB once a month for 12 years. And same message that we're communicating here. And during that period of time, Dave would say that, when he would go out in the community and people would come up to him, he says that I was the single most requested guest. And that's exactly the same message that we're sharing here. I've known this for a lot of years now. And when virtually every show we would have callers, 2, 3, 4 during the hour that we would invest together. And almost all of those callers got it. They knew exactly what we're sharing here. So I'm not going to give up on central the core of America.
But even in Pentecostal, churches and stuff like the colleges I attended, they are aware of the problem of syncretism, the mishmashing of the pagan and with God's covenant, and so like where they would have a harvest festival instead of Halloween, what I mean?
Right.
And they're not
And what do they do for Christmas? What do they do for Christmas and Easter? What do they do for Sundays?
Unfortunately, Christmas is much more entrenched, but there's some budding consciousness of the problem.
Yeah, that's great. And that's what we're trying to capitalize on. The show exists to inform and to make people aware of the hypocrisy of their religion, of their politics, of their country, of patriotism, of our military engagements, and the really absolute proof that these things aren't reliable. And so the moment a person begins to say, you know, there are questions, there are things that are of concern to me, and they become open to evidence and reason, then those are the very people we're trying to reach. That's the purpose of the show. We're serving their interests, their curiosity, their desire to know, because, frankly, their souls matter.
Right, right. I'm in this car driving, and so I'm aware that I probably sound bad. I wanted to make one point about the automobile stuff.
Yes, please.
The ridiculous involvement of our government in this realm. It wasn't so bad years ago when they bailed out Yahowah over at Chrysler, who came from GM to Chrysler, and they paid their loan back early and got back on their feet and stuff like that.
Right, because all they did with Chrysler is they guaranteed a loan. I mean, that's all the U.S. government did with Chrysler is guaranteed a loan, and the loan was paid back. But then what's interesting, of course.
They bailed out GM, and then GM goes ahead and builds their new Cadillac plant in China.
Well, of course.
I wouldn't buy a GM car on a bet, at this point.
Right. Well, and also, if you look at, they also bankrupt Chrysler, and they gave Chrysler to Fiat. Fiat didn't pay a penny for Chrysler, and the reason that Fiat took over Chrysler, not paying a dime for it, it was a gift from the U.S. government to Fiat, is because Fiat wanted to sell and had no distribution avenue for its new 500 line. And so what you see now is countless ads for the Fiat 500 series of mini cars that are now being sold through Chrysler dealerships. And so all we did was export car sales by allowing an Italian company not to buy, but to be given the assets of Chrysler. It was disgusting what occurred.
But Fiat's been such a seed of innovation. It was they who gave us the Yugo by transplanting an entire factory to a Serbo-Croatian country.
Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, it's so great that we have decided to give American companies by way of the presidential administrations to foreign companies and not charge them a dime for them. Just say, here, you can have the assets. We'll straddle Americans with the liabilities, but you can have the assets, and then you can use those assets to sell foreign-made products. It's perfect. It's the economy of Obama.
One last comment on the cars. I would suggest too much change too fast in the name of narcissistic, style changing. How'd you like to be an auto parts manager, having to track down the car? They build the cars. They have to maintain the parts supply for 10 years after they stop making the model. And with all these thousands of different parts. Remember checker cabs? You could take a door off a 55 checker and put it on an 81 checker, and it would fit. That's the extreme, simplest other end. But, I mean, they've got so darn many parts, and they change, and then these things aren't engineered right, and they fail. Maybe if they would make something, leave it the heck alone for a few years and get it dependable and leave some of this stuff alone. But it's change.
Yeah, Glenn, I'm going to put you on hold because you are right. The cell phone is not spectacular, but I do want to comment on your last comment. So please continue to listen in, and hopefully we'll hear from you later on in the program. A lot of the blame against U.S. auto manufacturers has been leveled against this idea of style over substance, and I think it was true for a while. They competed with one another and enticed Americans to buy their product because of style. And they marketed the products very much like cigarette companies used to market to their products and beer companies market to their products of style and lifestyle that is associated with them, as opposed to making a dependable quality product. In Europe, and in Japan, substance, reliability was far more important than style. And so those companies made more dependable products than did the American auto makers. And there was therefore, an upwelling of sales for Asian and European, particularly German cars as a result of this. And to whatever degree you want to hold the GM and Ford and Chrysler accountable for style over substance, do so. But keep in mind that now if you look at the Europeans and the Japanese, they too have moved into the arena of style over substance. It's not to say that their cars are unreliable at this point, but certainly style is what sells. And that's really not the manufacture of a product's problem. A business is in business to make products that people want to buy. And if people want to buy style over substance, that's what they're going to make. And the nature of the free enterprise business, and when government intervenes to pass all sorts of regulations that say, this is how much mileage your car must get. This is how the lights must work. This is how the brakes must work. This is how the airbags must be deployed. This is how the seatbelt system needs to work, and it needs to drive you crazy if you don't snap your seatbelt. The more you get the government interfering in the free markets, you end up making a mess where companies make products that consumers don't want to buy. And to a large degree, I think it was federal meddling into the automotive markets that created the deterioration of these businesses, particularly American car manufacturers. It's very much like the American federal intervention in the home loan marketplace that caused the last Great Recession. Government does everything poorly, and everything that it touches ultimately decays. We'll be back after the commercial break. His trial regarding Jerusalem real estate, a case that was related to Olmert's activities before becoming prime minister in 2006. A total of 13 government officials, developers, and other business people were charged in 3 separate schemes. Now, I share this for 2 reasons. The first I'll share at this point, which is that America is not the only corrupt government. The fact is that governments are corrupt, no matter where you go. Every place in the world, the government is corrupt. So it's important that we not singularly focus on the American government. And also, it's important that we not establish Israel as this paradigm of virtue. Now, it is important that we are pro-Israel because God is pro-Israel. He made it real clear that in speaking of Israel, which means individuals who engage and endure with God, that those who curse Israel, those who speak against Israel, God will slight. And to be slighted by God is to be ignored by Him. That means at the end of your mortal existence, your soul is going to cease to exist. And it also means that God is not going to provide any protection. You're just going to ignore you, and you're going to be victimized by man's institutional malfeasance. But that doesn't mean that the current government is something that we should rally around in Israel or anyplace else. Yahowah goes to great lengths to share his frustration with the Jewish religion and with the Israeli government. And he has divorced himself of the Israelites as a direct result of their religious and political malfeasance. So it is important that we recognize that while God loves Israel and He has chosen Israelites, the government is flawed. And it is something that Yahowah criticizes and that we should therefore criticize. Now, there's a second reason I'm going to tell this story. I'm telling this story to you, and I want to finish this story before I share that. Olmert was forced to resign as prime minister in 2009 amid a flurry of corruption allegations. According to the original 2012 indictment, millions of dollars illegally changed hands to promote a series of real estate projects, including controversial housing developments in Jerusalem that required a change in zoning laws and earned developers some tax breaks. At the time, Olmert was mayor of Jerusalem and minister of industry and trade. He was accused of taking bribes to push the project forward. Now, what's interesting here is that the government takes bribes all the time. All the time. In fact, they demand bribes all the time. They solicit bribes. Now, if you don't think so, file plans to build an office complex, a factory, a shopping center, or even a gallery of homes on land you own and see what happens. Almost no matter what community you're in. The city officials, the county officials will have their hand out. They'll say, yeah, if you want us to approve your factory, your shopping center, your homes, your office complex, then you're going to give us money for a new park. You're going to give us money to improve our roads. You're going to give us money to do any manner of things that the city or county wants funding for. They're going to solicit and accept a bribe. It's your land. You're doing something that's good for the community, but they will take their pound of flesh, and they do it all the time. And so this idea that you view an individual as a criminal, as corrupt, and incarcerate them for paying bribes or accepting bribes to do something, by the way, that is overall beneficial for society. But you do not incarcerate or even bring to trial government personnel who solicit bribes and accept them all the time on behalf of their communities. You know, what's the difference? It's a pretty thin line between civil authority demanding all manner of payments that have nothing to do with the office complex or shopping center to allow somebody to develop their own land, and the individual paying that individual privately. It is an extraordinarily small line between those two things. We ought to be cognizant of that.